Russian Social Democrats came to the revolution divided. The Second Congress of the RSDLP, which took place in Brussels and London in 1903, saw the division of Social Democrats into two parties, Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. The Bolsheviks, headed by Lenin, thought that the party should push for the socialist revolution. They also thought that the members of the party should be subjected to strict discipline. Mensheviks thought that Russia is not ready for the socialist revolution, and that to push the situation towards socialist revolution would be unwise. It would be irresponsible. So what they thought was that the revolution, which was coming, it was obvious to them, would be a bourgeois revolution. And the role of Social Democrats would be to help the workers, to enlighten them, to work with them, to teach them about the revolution, but certainly not to push the socialist revolution forward. There was an unsurmountable barrier between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks. Plekhanov, for example, who was, together with Lenin, one of the leaders of the Bolsheviks in the Second Congress, very soon decided that he would rather join the Mensheviks. And he agitated the uprising, and then he agitated the participation in the elections, and then he agitated the alliance with constitutional Democrats, who were a bourgeois party. Mensheviks were also a rather more complicated picture. Here are the leaders of the Mensheviks. Martynov later on joined the Bolshevik party, but the rest of them disagreed on many other things. And some of them later agreed with the Bolsheviks and some did not. The two parties continued to work together, particularly on the outskirts of the Russian Empire, in the provincial towns. There were not so many Social Democrats. Stalin was drawn to the Bolsheviks by character. He was a radical. When it came to electing delegates to go to the Social Democratic meetings abroad, because they were not legal at that time, they usually elected Stalin. The first time Stalin met Lenin in Tampere, in Finland. Finland was not really abroad, it was part of the Russian Empire, but the rules there were different. And so the Social Democrats met there in Tampere Workers' Hall twice. They held their conferences there in 1905, 1906. Stalin admired Lenin's works, and he looked forward to seeing him. And he met him for the first time there. We do not have the exact date, because in Stalin's memoirs, the date is 1905, but in Tampere Museum, the date is 1906. It's not very important, but what is important is Stalin's reminiscences about this meeting. He said that he thought that Lenin was a giant, a huge man, and that he should behave as a very important person. He should enter the hall when everybody is already in place and seated, and then they start to applaud, and then he goes to the podium and starts speaking. But in fact, he saw a person who was not much taller than himself. And Stalin, as we remember, was not very tall. That person came to the hall long before the beginning of the meeting and was just speaking to the delegates. Stalin traveled to two more congresses of the Social Democrats in Stockholm and in London. On the way to London, in 1907, he met Lenin again. It was in Germany. And this is the apartment block where they met. We know nothing about this meeting. We don't know what they talked about in this building. And Stalin did not leave any recollections of that. Stalin, generally speaking, did not like to speak about his trips abroad. In 1906, Stalin got married. He married Kato Svanidze. She was a rather famous seamstress. She made dresses for all the wives of top officials in Tbilisi. Stalin's wife suffered for his activities. Soon after her marriage, she was arrested. The relatives managed to get her out. Interestingly, she was placed in the care of the wife of the chief of police of Tbilisi. Of course, she made her dresses, and so she was incarcerated in a rather luxurious house of the chief of police. Her relatives visited her there, and even Stalin visited her there. The police did not have his picture. And the family said that he was just a relative. At that time, Kato was pregnant. And soon, in 1907, she gave birth to their son. She was, of course, let out. The police was benevolent and allowed her to go. Stalin took her to Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan. And there, Kato was not happy at all. She did not have any relatives or friends there. Stalin was involved heavily in the revolutionary work. She was alone with a small child without any help. She did not have enough money. So this was not a very happy situation, and she started to fall ill. Her illness lasted from August to December. When her relatives heard about it, they tried to persuade Stalin to bring her back, but he prevaricated. He brought her back indeed, but when she was already very, very ill. It is not clear what she died of. Some people say tuberculosis. Some people say that on the way back she contracted typhus. So in December she died. And Stalin was devastated. To his daughter, later on, he said, "She was a very sweet person and she melted my heart. With her, all my warmth to humanity is gone. My heart is now made of stone." He threw himself into Kato's grave, and his friends had to pull him out. But he didn't need a child. He was a revolutionary. There was no place for a child in his life. So his son remained with the Svanidzes, Kato's relatives. He saw him next time only in 1921 when the Svanidzes moved to Moscow. Despite his love for Kato, Stalin had many lovers, and perhaps he had illegitimate children, but they did not leave any trace in his life. The Svanidzes suffered for their kindness. In the 1930s, many of them perished in Stalin's prisons and camps. The repression against the Bolsheviks were well-founded in terms of the laws of the Russian Empire. The 1907 Congress took a resolution, by Menshevik votes, by the way, that expropriations should be stopped. What is an expropriation? Actually, it is an attempt to get money by any means possible, including robbery. The Bolsheviks, indeed, they needed money, and they tried to enlist ordinary criminals to help them. But just as this resolution was passed, the Bolsheviks organized a daring bank heist.